great privilege for me to be here with you all. Today, let me tell you about the application of electromagnetic waves. Wherever you go, whatever you do, every minute, every second, you're surrounded by these waves. This extends from the lowest frequency used in modern radio communication to microwaves, to terahertz, to infrared, to ultraviolet, and to X-rays, and finally to gamma rays. And the small spectrum visible, you can see with your naked eye without any other instrument, because throughout all these bands, only one particular thing you can see. If you just switch on your TV, you are thinking only you are listening to the TV signal, but parallelly so many waves of different frequencies are bombarding you, right from light waves to microwaves to radio waves, from GPS signals, from Wi-Fi signals, from your neighbors' mobile phones. So many different signals are bombarding you. That's why this electromagnetic waves, without it, we cannot live. So it's very important thing we should learn about it. So this consists of, it's an electric field and magnetic field are perpendicular to one another, and they are perpendicular to the direction of propagation. So it's called electromagnetic transverse electromagnetic field. So it propagates at the speed of light. So this is the frequency at 1 second. How many signals pass through in 1 second at a particular point? You get the frequency.
EM waves are produced by the vibration of charged particles and have electrical and magnetic properties. But unlike ocean waves that require water, EM waves travel through the vacuum of space at the constant speed of light. EM waves have crests and troughs like ocean waves. The distance between crests is the wavelength. While some EM wavelengths are very long and are measured in meters, many are tiny and are measured in billionths of a meter, nanometers. The number of these crests that pass a given point within 1 second is described as the frequency of the wave. One wave, or cycle, per second is called a hertz. Long EM waves, such as radio waves, have the lowest frequency and carry less energy. Adding energy increases the frequency of the wave and makes the wavelength shorter. Gamma rays are the shortest, highest energy waves in the spectrum.
Your frequency is less, your wavelength is more. And if you have more energy, you have higher frequency. So this is, every time it is related to your frequency, energy is related to your frequency. That is why you can see here, this particular gamma rays have more energy compared to the radio waves. And in this visible light, if you, why you are able to see green in a leaf? Because some of the particles absorb some portion of the light waves and some are reflected. So a leaf reflects green color. That's why you are able to see green color when you see a leaf, because it reflects green and absorbs every other thing. Though you are surrounded by so many waves, you can see some color because that particular object absorbs all the other except that and reflects that. That's why you are able to see that particular color. So now this electromagnetic waves, who is the father of it? If you ask, everybody will easily say that is Maxwell. Maxwell is the father of electromagnetic world. He brought in beautiful this equation. It's better. That's why we should know the foundation of electromagnetic waves. In March 1861, James Clerk Maxwell, a Scottish physicist, published the first piece of a 4-part paper entitled On Physical Lines of Forces. He said that electricity, magnetism, and light are all part of the same electromagnetic spectrum. So they are all 3 components, but they are all part of electromagnetism. That means people were thinking earlier, electricity is different, magnetism is different, and light is different. But finally, he said that all of them are electromagnetic waves. For example, the distribution of electric charges were linked to the pattern of, here you see this is a Gauss law. It relates electric field, distribution of electric field is related to charge. And this is the magnetic field. There is no magnetic pole can be alone, because that means there are no separate magnetic charges. So Faraday's law, a changing electric field always produces a magnetic field. If you see, his main contribution comes in this one, because earlier Ampere said that a magnetic field is produced by an electric field. But he added this term. This is the main thing what Maxwell did. You can see here, Ampere's law is mainly about the change of magnetic field produces the electric current here. But now in a parallel plate capacitor, there is an area here. So what about the current in this gap? So how would you account the current in this gap? So that's why Ampere's law related the magnetic field around the current to the current through a surface. But in this discharging capacitor, there is a current through a surface too. So now this Ampere's law had to be modified to include this. That is the field between the plates of the capacitor. So that's why he brought in the term displacement current, and he resolved the conflict by introducing both conduction current and displacement current. And he made this equation in this way. So magnetic fields are produced by both conduction currents and by time varying electric fields. That's all Maxwell did, nothing else. And you can see here, because of his things, so many now, all the computers, all the mobiles, all the phones, everything uses electromagnetic waves. And as you go up, as I said, energy increases, frequency increases, your energy increases. So these radio waves have lower energy compared to the gamma rays. So this ultraviolet and X-rays and gamma rays have the maximum energy. They are ionizing rays. And this is from visible light onwards, they are non-ionizing. That means even if you are exposed to it, your DNA will not be affected. But this ultraviolet or X-rays or gamma rays, if you are exposed to it, your DNA will be affected. So that's why it's very, very important. So now I wanted to explain you about why this Maxwell, what he did something great that what others did not do. He put it in a beautiful mathematical fashion. He said that nature can be cajoled and she can beautifully bring out everything in nature can be expressed in mathematical form. Everything, right from everything, starting from radio waves, starting from what stars are reflecting, what your everyday activities, what you are reflecting, everything is a wave. So that is when he taught that electromagnetic waves are part of nature and nature can be cajoled, and we can find out that can be represented in a mathematical. Now, this electromagnetic waves are part and parcel of our life. So that is why this all the four laws what Maxwell's brought together and joined together became the Maxwell's equation. So this, after Maxwell brought in, we can see here in 1865, the actual story began in Karlsruhe, Germany, with the scientist called Heinrich Hertz. He became the first to demonstrate the evidence of such waves. He built a big apparatus that detected these waves, because Maxwell just brought in these equations. But it's Hertz, because we call them as Hertz now. First 2 gigahertz, 3 gigahertz. What do you mean by that? Into 10 power 9 Hertz. Everything is expressed in Hertz because of this man called Heinrich Hertz. He did in 1887, he demonstrated that with a beautiful way of an experiment, and he predicted Maxwell's equation that he showed. He experimentally demonstrated Maxwell's equation. So that's when people understood that these waves exist. And then slowly you will be seeing that how different people found different waves. For example, William Herschel found out that below the red color of this light waves, he saw something warmer, and then he found infrared. Similarly, Richter found the ultraviolet, the other side of the light waves. So like this, everything happened around 1800. So many people, if it might be something is there beyond gamma rays, we are not sure, but up to gamma rays, we have now found, starting from light radio waves, microwaves, millimeter waves, and then you come to infrared waves, and then you come to light waves, then ultraviolet waves, X-rays, and then gamma rays. So as you go up, your energy increases. So now how did all these things came into picture? So now as you're going ahead, people started inventing more and more because they wanted more frequency, more power. Everything depended on how you can increase the frequency, how we can increase the power. So the first thing that was invented was radar. So radar is an acronym for radio detection and ranging. Radio is for example, it's an object detection system that uses electromagnetic waves to identify the range, altitude, direction. So now this is one of the first and most important application of radio waves, of electromagnetic waves, you can always say. So this mainly the wars, World War I and World War II pushed the strategic needs for high frequency and high power above and above. And in 1921, a scientist called Albert Hull, he discovered magnetron. That was the first device he discovered which can generate, which is an oscillator, it can generate microwaves. And so, and then slowly one by one, traveling wave tube came. This is some M-type tube, and then you get O-type tubes and traveling wave tubes. So many other tubes started to come. And then one day, Percy L. Penzias, he was having some chocolate in his bag, and after some time he was working in a magnetron, and he saw this chocolate started melting, and then he understood that microwaves can heat. So that's when microwave oven, he invented microwave oven, and now every home has a microwave oven. So microwaves generates what does it do? How does it do microwave oven? It vibrates water cells generating heat. That water cells in your food that is vibrated, that generates heat. And that's why from the inside to outside, sometimes if you just open a microwave oven and take the food outside, you can see outside it can be cold, but inside it is hot. It operates at the frequency of 2.45 gigahertz. Every microwave oven, it is almost the same frequency it operates, and the energy output is around 400 to 1000 watts. So now this, other than magnetron, people started to build klystron amplifier. Kompfner again discovered TWT, and later because of superconducting magnets, gyrotron and much high power tubes started to come. You know, some of the tubes, high power tubes, microwave tubes, you can is used in warfare technologies. I will be explaining in detail. This type of high power microwaves, if you send it into your enemy system, it can puncture the enemy system completely. Enemies, every electronic system will be affected, and his aircraft or his system completely will get jammed, and he will not be able to work. So this microwaves at high power and high frequency, as you go up, it's really advantageous, but it's very difficult to build such a system. So if you can, how are you able to control this electromagnetic spectrum? People are thinking will determine who will win the war. So that's why it's very, very important. Now, the first thing, this radar, because of the radar, this England won the war in World War I, they say, because World War II, because at that time, Germany was coming against with they had lot of flights, but England and its UK and its allies had very less flights. But this Winston Churchill asked Robert Watson Watt to build a death ray, and he installed so many radars along the coast of England. And whenever any German flight started to come, this radar, it's like a look through. This radar started to look through that, and it started to hit one by the guns started to fire at every aircraft. So the Germans were wondering, what is this unseen eye? Who is looking? Who is a spy who is going and telling that? And finally, they found the radar was the reason that Britain won the war. So this radar is an object detection system that uses electromagnetic waves to identify the range, altitude, direction, or speed of both moving and fixed objects such as aircraft, ships, motor vehicles, weather formations, and terrain and others. If you see an ambulance, if it comes towards you, the pitch of the sound increases. If it goes away from you, the pitch of the sound decreases. So this is the same way every radar will operate. Mostly it is called Doppler radiation. And here you see objects moving towards the antenna increases the frequency, and objects moving away from the antenna decreases the frequency. And so what happens is, you can, when an object is coming towards you, you can see how the time taken, for example, the time taken for the object to come, the wave to go from your radar towards the object and hit the object and come back, the time can be correlated to the distance, and also correlated whether the object is moving towards you and the object is moving away from you. And also you can find whether the object is your enemy or friend, identify friend or foe. You can easily find out based on the frequency detection whether it's an enemy or it's he is a friend. So this way, most of these radars are used in microwave frequency. If you go little above the microwave frequency, you get the millimeter wave frequencies where all the wavelengths are in millimeter wave range. When the wavelengths are in millimeter wave range, you get millimeter wave frequency. So this microwaves, for example, many of the Doppler radar image seen on TV weather news uses microwaves for local weather forecasting. So using microwaves, you can do beautiful weather forecasting and many other things because it almost maps the atmosphere and it tells that what is the wind, everything you can map, the weather conditions you can map. So this is a one such Doppler radar image, but this is mostly in the microwaves. What about if it goes beyond the microwaves? Now Carl Benz invented the automobiles. Now first time when he took for a public drive, it crashed against a wall. So that is the first thing what happens. Mainly the driver is the only figure which we cannot control. The driver is the only figure we cannot control. So scientists started to work. Now how would I be able to come out of this problem, of the problem of driver? So they started to do with making the car stronger, seat belts and airbags and all these things. But then finally, whatever you do, the driver, they could not remove. So finally, recently, by using radars and it's installed around your car, nowadays you can get driverless car. How would you do that? Because when you go up and up in frequencies, in millimetric waves, you have radars and you can put it under the car and side of the car. But if you have at microwave frequency, the radar size and antenna size will be too huge. So at 77 gigahertz and so you can tuck the radar under the rear end. So now even braking also may not prevent sometimes a collision. And so in RDA8, additional braking also can be applied in using many of these things. And if you can make a driver assistance system or a driverless system, you can make it accident free. That's what people are planning. And many of the cars in US are now driverless cars. Though people are scared to buy a driverless car, but such collision avoidance radars help in building the driverless car. These are all collision avoidance radars and mostly they operate in 77 gigahertz. And what they are supposed to do, if they see a bicycle at a distance of around 100 meters, that radar should be able to detect that bicycle. It must distinguish the bicycle from other objects like trees, bridges, roadside signs, and moving vehicles. And at a high frequency, such a system uses an antenna approximately 4 inches in diameter. So that's why it could be tucked on every side. So first they started at 34, 50, and now they had almost gone to 77. So that's why we can say that a major role in reducing traffic fatalities, and this is a collision warning system. You can see so many other, every side you have a radar warning thing, and it can detect and track objects in the frequency domain, triggering a driver warning of a collision, or initiate an electronic stability control invention, all these things. So now coming to this radars, mostly I told you it helped in England to win the war. So now that's why this radar became the backbone of electronic warfare. What is electronic warfare? It consists of electronic support measure, electronic countermeasure, electronic countermeasures. So now I would explain you what are all each and everything by some videos, and I would like to explain you. For example, electronic attack, you wanted to attack an enemy. So how would you do it? Either you can jam him when he's coming into your territory, or deceive him by sending wrong information, or as I said, high power microwaves or light or laser can be sent to drones or whatever he has and harm or destroy his equipment. Or if you want to protect yourself, you can modify your platform Now you can make it, that is called stealth technology, by changing the radar cross section or modifying your radar by making it more complex. So this sort of things you can do it. And this is one of the ways. So I would go in detail to explain you about what it is. So now coming to this radar, it was coined as during this World War II because radio detection and ranging, all of you know, it can be fitted to the ground, it can be fitted to the ship, it can be fitted in the air, and even in space-based platform. So radar is the main thing of the electronic warfare system, though many other things are there. Today, almost everybody is familiar with fighter aircraft, battle tanks, warships, and submarines. Majority of people have seen them in action, either directly or via televisions. But this invisible fight using the radio and radar emissions is always going on in the atmosphere. Electronic warfare, you cannot see with your eyes. Like how you see battle tank, warships, everything you can see with your eyes. But the silent battle of beams is called electronic warfare. This electronic warfare is global. It's not strictly electronic. It is not conducted using electrons, but rather it is conducted using the electromagnetic waves. So it uses almost the entire range of the electromagnetic spectrum. So that's why you can also call it as electromagnetic warfare. So Winston Churchill was the first person to coin this term called battle of beams. It is not a real battle, but it is an invisible war. So that's why finally it boiled down to the term electronic warfare. You know, Abbas, since the end of the World War II, electronic warfare has been one of the best kept secrets with technical experts and armed forces. People were keeping it as a secret thing because they were not able to understand what is it that is making our aircraft to be seen by Britain. That's what German people were wondering. It is still kept a secret because whoever has the power over the electromagnetic spectrum, the next course of war, he is going to win. So for a crew of military aircraft, a tank or a warship, an appropriate electronic warfare tactic which has been kept secret can mean the difference between the success and failure of their mission. So that much, it's very, very important. That's why electronic warfare can be defined as an activity which uses the electromagnetic spectrum or some sort of directed energy to attack a target or impede a target. So even in Battle of Lebanon, you can see because of electronic warfare, Israel won the war. So yeah, this electronic warfare has been matured to radar guided surface to air missiles and anti-artillery evolved through Vietnam War and many other Middle East wars. Many of the wars, this electronic warfare, electronic countermeasures and brute jamming of signals, breaking of electronic lock-on an aircraft, all these techniques are used. Even in the Desert Storm of Gulf War, false target information was injected into Iraqi integrated air defense system. This was misleading their computers. So it is an utterly deadly battlefield where victory or defeat can come in a matter of seconds, even microseconds, I would say. So that's why electronic warfare is very, very important. As I showed you the figure, electronic warfare can be divided into 3 categories: electronic support, electronic countermeasures, electronic countermeasures. For example, why you need all these things? You should have electronic support measures to protect your system when an enemy is coming to hit you, and you should have a defensive tactic and an offensive technique. And then when you are using electronic countermeasures and somebody is using electronic countermeasures to protect your attack, you should have a counter measure to defeat that purpose. So let me take an example of a ship, and you are a ship captain. So now how would you detect that ship's signature? Like if I see you in an infrared spectrum, you will be able to give a signature. There will be a heat rays around you. Similarly, every ship, every thing that is powered will give out some energy. So your ship's signature can be heat signature or electromagnetic signatures. So the extent how much it is emitted can be altered. So for example, your ship, if you don't want your ship to be seen by enemy, you can alter your ship's components like propulsion and other things so that your signature will not be that much visible by others. So you can protect your signature, and you can also try to detect other signatures. So signatures, as I said, it can be in infrared, that is heat signatures, or electromagnetic. So now infrared is why you are getting infrared signature, because you have weapons, engines, everything emits heat. And that's why you are able to get heat signatures. Why are you getting electromagnetic signature? Everything that is powered emits electricity. Everything that is powered by electricity emits electromagnetic waves, and you have an electromagnetic signature. So ship energy, weapons, shielders, power plants, everything emit electromagnetic signatures. Now, if your ship is big, you will emit more. So other people can look at you very easily. So how you are able to conceal your ship by seeing from an enemy ship, and how you are able to effectively see the enemy ship, it's very, very important. So now your ship will have the radar, and that it will help you in getting the range of your enemy ship, angle of your enemy ship, and the velocity with which the enemy ship is coming towards you or going away from you. Sometimes you can also detect stuffs like weapons, what kind of shields they are using, what kind of armor they are using. So you can use a scanning, either it can be omnidirectional, every direction, or it can be a narrow focus, which is mainly concentrated. But then when you are using a narrow focus, your signature will become more. So that's why you should know when to use omnidirectional, when to use narrow focus. And similarly, your scanning can be passive or active. You can scan out and in space just like that, trying to see whenever unwary ship can come, and you can pick up their signature. Or it can be active, you are trying to deliberately searching for some other ship signature. Similarly, your warfare tactic can be offensive, that you can use an electromagnetic pulse or something to spoil the enemy system, or it can be defensive to protect your own system. And similarly, you can use some defensive, like you can cheat the enemy by using different methods like electromagnetic flares. For example, your ship is being tracked by an enemy ship. Now your captain knows that enemy is tracking you. So now you can send some flares or something, launch some electromagnetic flares from your ship that can mask the electromagnetic signature of your ship. Similarly, decoy missiles also will transmit a signature that will almost mimic the signature of your ship, and the enemy ship will lock on to that decoy instead of locking on to you. And also you can use stealth techniques by modifying or altering the shield of your ship or the shape of your ship. So now why this electromagnetic signatures are very important is, if there is a war, whomever is going to win the war is mainly dependent on who has major power to control the electromagnetic spectrum. So I wanted to show you, before ending it, one video. Hope you will be able to appreciate.
The EA The EA-18G Growler is a key part of every air attack squadron. Its primary purpose, to shut down the enemy's radar. One way the Growler does that is by doing something called jamming. Here's how it works. The Growler has a receiver on each wingtip. These receivers search out the radar signals on the enemy's surface-to-air missiles. The information travels to a computer in the Growler's cockpit. Within milliseconds, the computer analyzes the signals and identifies them as safe or a threat. If they're a threat, the Growler activates one of its jamming pods.
Per the configuration, we can have up to 3, one on each wing, and they'll be the same. And then we also have the one here on the center line.
The jamming pods overwhelm the enemy's radar by sending out electronic noise. This allows friendly fighters to sneak unseen past enemy lines. The Growler doesn't just jam the enemy. It can inflict physical damage too.
Our primary mission is jamming. However, a secondary mission we have is using the HARM, as you see here on the wing.
HARM stands for High-Speed Anti-Radiation Missile. It's specifically designed to hone in on the surface-to-air radar's electronic signals.
The HARM zones in on where enemy radar is, and then looks to explode over it.
This is stealth technology. You can use a different material, or you can use a different design. And so instead, you can shape the surface. If you shape the surface, you will deflect the radio waves. If you coat it by using different coatings, you can absorb the radio waves. This is the way you can prevent the enemy from looking at you. Now, for example, this is an aircraft. So instead of looking at making an aircraft like this, if you make an aircraft in this way, you can see the radar wave. The radar is trying to detect this aircraft, but the reflected signal is not going back to the radar. It's going away. That is why it's very, very important. And so you can change the shape and design to make it more stealthy. So here the clean and angular design deflects the incoming radio signals. Here the design of the ship is made such that the other ship cannot look at it. This is one of the coatings which can be used to deflect the thing. I wanted to show you this picture. If you see this picture, you can see a truck and some smoke and a mountain in the background with a normal light. Okay, but now I'm going to use this one using a thermal image, that is infrared image. In infrared image, this particular thing, I can see the truck, a helicopter also I can see, which is hidden here. So now this helicopter, but now if I combine both these things, I can see a beautiful image. Actually, why space is so interesting, you know, in 1969, when we were all young, 500,000 people were watching live as Neil Armstrong and Buzz took those famous moon steps upon the moon. It was a giant leap for mankind, and it was too huge that became the talk of the town. Then came the space shuttle, and in 1990, along with the shuttle, space station came into existence that produced around 100 kilowatts of power with 2 to 4 astronauts all the time. From Yuri Gagarin in April 1961 until today, more than 540 human beings have been in outer space. Space is very interesting, and it is the only thing close to infinity. We can perceive it as mind-boggling. That is why Ed White became the first American who walks on the space. When he was asked to come back into the capsule, he said that that is the saddest moment of his life. You know, that is a scientific curiosity of space. What is there? Is there something out there? Are we alone here? Is there some other extraterrestrials that people want to find out? That's why space research has become very, very interesting. The first commercial radio station went on the air in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on November 2nd, 1920. A major discovery of Bell Labs later in 1932 revealed that the stars and other objects in space are radiating radio waves. So they never knew that till that time the stars can radiate radio waves. Radio astronomy was born that day. However, the scientists wanted a very huge, giant telescopes to detect that long wavelength radio waves from space, because the enormous parabolic dish antenna, which has to detect a small, for example, in the moon, I have a small basketball type of area. That area, if I have to do, I need a huge telescope that for giant Mexico array uses a huge, around 27 dish antennas. If any one of you can go to Pune, to National Center for Radiophysics, that is Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Pune, it will be amazing. I have gone there and I met the scientists who have discovered quasars and pulsars, because this is such a breathtaking field, and it's the enormous parabolic dish antenna. It will be so huge. Why you need such a huge antenna? Because such arrays, for example, in Mexico array, you go through Google, you can find out it uses around 27 dish antennas shaped into a giant Y, with each arm capable of stretching for around 13 miles. Scientists have spread this link antenna across the globe. Across the globe, they have found it, so that even from Hawaii to Virginia Islands, so that you can find a small part in moon. You know, quasars they have found that is 1 of the billion years old. Arno in 1965, using long L-band microwaves, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson made an incredible accidental discovery. They detected what they thought was noise. First, when their antenna, they were getting a lot of noise. So they thought it is from noise from their instrument. But constantly when they observed that this thing is coming from everywhere in space, this radiation is called cosmic microwave background radiation. If you have an eye that can see microwaves, you can see the whole universe surrounded with microwaves. What is this one? For some 14 billion years back, the first thing that happened is light came. When the light photon came, that light got shifted from light frequency to microwave frequency after so many years. And now the whole universe, that relic radiation of the Big Bang can be seen. So here you can see the picture shows emission from a variety of sources, including radio bursts from the sun. Now, you should understand the sun. Otherwise, when the sun is emitting radio bursts or there are sunspots, how would you find it? So this is by using this radio burst from the sun. And this graph, the far right of this graph shows radio burst caused from the sun, caused by electrons that have been ejected into space during solar flares moving at 20% of the speed of light. Even you can see this, the frequency of radio emissions over a 24-hour period, 1 day of radio emissions. It's full 1 day. So the frequency is over 1000 kilohertz. Here, this is the frequency. This is for 1 day. So this is over 1000 kilohertz are from Jupiter. And while the Earth produces frequency between 200 to 400. So this is the way you can find out what is the emissions 1 day we are getting it. And this National Radio Astronomy Observatory's radio telescope in New Mexico is one of the world's premier radio observatories. It consists of 27 antennas arranged in white patterns so that you will be able to get a small patch of sky. You can find out what is a radio emission coming from or what is a black hole emitting radio waves. All these things you can find out. You know, this is one of the quasar, which is one of the largest and one of the oldest thing in the universe. A dark image with defined spot of blue in lower left and green in the upper right, with a spot of yellow in the center. You can see this. Astronomers identified the quasars with the help of radio data from the Very Large Array Telescope. This is a Very Large Array Telescope because many galaxies with quasars appear bright. Many galaxies have quasars in that. Even our galaxy has, so you can see that using radio telescopes. So infrared data from the Spitzer Space Telescope is colored both blue and green.
However, scientists need giant antennas to detect weak, long wavelength radio waves from space. The enormous Arecibo radio dish antenna measures 305 meters in diameter, over 3 football fields. Scientists can link the signals from an array of separate radio antennas to focus on tiny slices of distant space. Such arrays act as a single immense collector. This giant New Mexico array uses 27 parabolic dish antennas shaped into a giant Y, with each arm capable of stretching for 13 miles. Scientists have even spread these linked antennas across the globe. One of the largest stretches from Hawaii to the Virgin Islands and acts like such a powerful
Japanese advanced microwave scanning radiometer. This is on Aqua satellite. It can give in the polar region, even though through the clouds and through the snowfall, this particular instrument is able to provide data to us. So this is over the Pacific Ocean. You can see a warm water. What is the surface current? How much sea height? Sometimes the sea height increases and that creates problem. So some of the radars can observe what is the sea height. And this is a hurricane showing the distribution of rain intensity. All these things you are able to see in the microwave. This is the one which I said the universe itself is surrounded by microwaves, and this is a microwave background radiation. This is I told you that infrared is the one which lies closer to the, after the microwaves, we get the infrared and then visible light. That is the red of the visible light. Red, first seen in a visible light, red has lower power and blue has more. A star, very hot star, you can see that as a blue colored one. So how your body emits heat rays? If you put a fire, it emits light. And because it's too hot, but your body is not hot like a fire, that's why it emits heat, but not that much hot like a fire. So that one, if you keep a temperature or an infrared instrument, you can see your body temperature, and you can be mapped using infrared instrument. This was discovered by William Herschel. He went on keeping thermometers on each of these frequencies, and beyond the red, he found the temperature was increase in temperature from blue to red. That's when he understood that something is there in this region that beyond the red, and he called it as infrared. That, see, you can see here this cat image. Any one of us, all of us are emitting infrared. And if you see us through the infrared camera, we can see this sort of images. This is the Cassini spacecraft captured this image of Saturn's aurora, because using infrared waves, you can see the blue and the clouds in red. So using the electromagnetic spectrum, you can study beautifully various places of the universe. This is Spitzer image, Spitzer Space Telescope and James Webb Space Telescope have pictured this image of Orion in infrared and others. You can see beautifully the star forming region in the nebula, Orion Nebula, but in the visible light, you cannot see this. And this Cassini Nebula, again, this is star forming region. You can see beautifully through the infrared. And the forest fires can be detected through infrared. And the earth can be monitored through the infrared. Now, I wanted to explain you. See, now this Newton, he kept 2 prisms. And through one prism, when he sent the sunlight, it separated into all the beautiful colors, violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange. He put the second prism, and again, all the colors joined to one color. So this way, you can find out various colors in a spectrum by using 2 prisms. That's when people found there are many colors. So when a photograph of a solar eclipse reveals the dramatic coronal streamers that are normally too faint. That's why you should not see a solar eclipse, because the coronal streamers which come from that time. But now how would you study that? So this can be studied using this infrared image and using this sun. You can see here in this particular thing, image of the surface of the sun appears warm yellow. But now if a star, if our sun becomes more hot, it will become blue. If our sun becomes less hot, it will become red. So that is the way we can see a color of a sun. So I'm going a little faster. See, now all of us know some of the sound beyond whatever we can perceive, like a whistle sound, dogs can perceive it so easily. Similarly, a bee can see an ultraviolet light. We cannot see an ultraviolet light, but a bee can see. That's why using ultraviolet bee trapper, we can trap a bee. Bug zappers trap a bee in ultraviolet. And our sun has ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, ultraviolet C, it sends out. And ultraviolet A is almost closer to the visible light. But ultraviolet B is very dangerous. So, but most of them are absorbed by ozone layer, and ultraviolet C, the shortest wavelength, is the most dangerous one, and almost 100% is absorbed by the light. So this, how much this is able to do ultraviolet right from our sun, we are having the ozone studies, we are finding out how much it's absorbed and how much it's coming to our earth, everything. We have giant telescopes to find out. And similarly, in ultraviolet, we can find various beautiful spiral arms of galaxies using ultraviolet. In this one, you can see 3 different galaxies taken in visible light. But now ultraviolet also shows us 3 similar light. You can see such a beautiful way. In this one, you cannot see. So in various, because the stars emit various frequencies, and now using various types of instruments, you can study the stars. So ozone hole, how it has been happened, why it has happened, all those things you can study using equipment. Now ultraviolet light from the sun and from various planets, you can study using these instruments abroad, which have been kept on the satellites and Jupiter's, you can find. And now coming to X-rays. X-rays are used to find out about your teeth, X-rays used to find out about your bone, but X-rays also used to find out about the stars. They can find out about white dwarf stars, neutron stars, black holes. They're all emitting X-rays. So using X-rays, you can capture those images and you can study that. That's why scientists, space scientists use these instruments a lot. An X-ray image of the sun, you can see the solar flares and sunspot that is not visible to the light, you can see here. And supernova explosion, a star, most of the star dies. So this one of the beautiful supernova explosion has been captured. This moving faster, this gamma rays. Coming to the last one, this is one of the most violent bursts in the universe is given in the gamma rays. So gamma ray is the most powerful and it can even penetrate your DNA and it can cause damage to it. Scientists use gamma rays to sometimes heal cancer because it destroys, it goes and hits in the DNA level. So this gamma rays, also some of the gamma ray burst which has happened. I will show you one image. This is an image of our Milky Way galaxy. And now this normal image you can always see, but in gamma ray, how beautifully you can see the gamma ray burst coming and going across this Milky Way. You can keep seeing. This is like suddenly some bright area coming and vanishing. This sort of things you can see here. I'm not showing any other thing because of the lack of time. Thank you so much.